Eleanor hadn't been back to her childhood home in over 20 years, not since her parents had passed away and the old Victorian house had been sold. But now, due to a complicated legal matter regarding the estate, she found herself standing on the overgrown front lawn, the familiar, yet somehow smaller, house looming before her like a forgotten memory made tangible. A wave of nostalgia washed over her, tinged with a faint undercurrent of unease. The house was just as she remembered it, the peeling paint on the porch swing, the crooked weather vane atop the turret, the stained glass window in the front hall casting rainbow-colored shadows on the dusty floor. Stepping inside, however, felt different. The air was heavy with the scent of dessous and something else, something faintly metallic and unsettlingly familiar, a scent she couldn't quite place. As Eleanor began to explore room by room, the house seemed to whisper secrets to her, stirring long dormant memories. The creaking floorboards in the hallway echoed the sound of her father's heavy footsteps. The faint floral pattern on the wallpaper in her old bedroom seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light, just as it had in her childhood nightmares. It was in her bedroom that the unease began to solidify into something more tangible. The closet door, which she distinctly remembered always staying slightly ajar, was now firmly closed. A shiver ran down her spine. As a child, she had been convinced there was something living in that closet, something that would reach out and grab her in the dead of night. She had long since dismissed it as childish fancy, but standing there now, the memory felt disturbingly real. Later that day, as dusk began to settle, Eleanor found herself in the attic. It was dusty and filled with forgotten relics of her family's past. Amongst the cobweb, draped furniture and stacks of old photo albums, she found a small, wooden rocking horse tucked away in a dark corner. Its painted eyes seemed to follow her as she moved, and a faint, rhythmic creaking sound emanated from it, even though no one was touching it. A sudden, sharp memory flashed through her mind, the terror she had felt as a child when she swore she saw that rocking horse moving on its own in the dead of night. The house seemed to be playing on her childhood fears, bringing them back to life with a subtle, insidious touch. The shadows in the corners of the rooms seemed deeper, more alive. The silence of the house at night was punctuated by faint, unsettling sounds, a soft scratching from behind the walls, a whispered sigh that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. One evening, Eleanor found herself drawn to the basement. As a child, she had been strictly forbidden from going down there, her parents always citing vague concerns about dampness and spiders. But now, a morbid curiosity compelled her. The wooden stairs creaked ominously under her weight as she descended into the darkness. The air in the basement was cold and heavy, carrying a damp, earthy smell and that faint, metallic scent she had noticed earlier, now stronger and more distinct. She fumbled for the light switch, and a single, bare bulb flickered to life, casting long, distorted shadows across the unfinished space. The concrete floor was damp, and strange, dark stains marred the walls. In one corner, she saw a large, dark stain that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Her heart pounded in her chest. Had something terrible happened in this house? Something her parents had kept hidden from her? Suddenly, she heard a soft giggle from the far corner of the basement. It sounded like a child's giggle, high-pitched and innocent, yet somehow deeply unsettling in the oppressive atmosphere. Eleanor froze, her breath catching in her throat. She was alone in the house. There was no one else here. "Hello," she called out, her voice barely a whisper. The only response was another giggle, closer this time, followed by a faint scratching sound coming from behind a stack of old boxes. Terror seized Eleanor. This wasn't her imagination. Something was in the basement with her. Something that sounded like a child, but felt profoundly wrong. She backed away slowly, her eyes fixed on the stack of boxes, her hand reaching out for the rickety wooden stairs. As she took her first step, a small, pale hand reached out from behind the boxes and grabbed her ankle. Eleanor screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the silent house. She stumbled backward, falling hard on the cold concrete floor. The hand tightened its grip, its touch surprisingly strong and cold. She looked down and saw a small, pale child peering out from behind the boxes. Its eyes were wide and black, devoid of any light or emotion, and its mouth was stretched into a wide, unsettling grin, revealing rows of tiny, razor-sharp teeth. The child giggled again, a sound that now sent shivers of pure terror down Eleanor's spine. It began to pull her towards the darkness behind the boxes, its grip unyielding. Eleanor struggled, kicking and screaming, but the child was surprisingly strong. As she was dragged across the cold floor, she caught a glimpse of what lay behind the boxes. It was a small, hidden room, its walls stained with dark, ominous marks. And in the center of the room, she saw several other pale, wide-eyed children, all staring at her with that same unsettling grin. The last thing Eleanor saw before she was pulled into the darkness was the stained glass window in the front hall, its rainbow colors now seeming to mock the horror unfolding in the depths of her childhood home. The house, it seemed, had finally revealed its long-held secret, a secret born of fear and childhood nightmares, now terrifyingly real. Eleanor's scream echoed through the silent house, a desperate cry against the sudden, terrifying assault. She thrashed wildly, kicking her legs and trying to pry the child's icy grip from her ankle. The small hand was surprisingly strong, its grip like a vise, and the tiny, sharp nails dug into her skin. The child continued to giggle, its wide, black eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. The metallic scent in the air grew stronger, almost overpowering, and Eleanor's mind flashed with a horrifying possibility: blood. She managed to roll over, scrambling to get away from the small, malevolent figure, but the child held fast, its strength belying its size. Eleanor looked towards the hidden room, her blood running cold at the sight of the other children. They remained motionless, their pale faces and wide, dark eyes fixed on her, their unsettling grins unwavering. They looked like porcelain dolls frozen in a macabre tableau, yet their silent presence radiated a palpable sense of dread. As the child dragged her closer to the hidden room, Eleanor noticed something etched into the concrete floor near the doorway. It was a series of crude, childlike drawings, stick figures with wide, terrified eyes, and a recurring image of a house with a crooked turret, just like this one. Beneath the drawings were names, scrawled in what looked like dried blood: Lily, Thomas, Annabelle. Names that felt vaguely familiar, like echoes from a forgotten past. A horrifying realization began to dawn on Eleanor. These weren't just children. They were trapped souls, their innocence twisted into something monstrous by the darkness that permeated this house. The child finally pulled Eleanor into the hidden room. The air inside was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, mixed with that cloying metallic scent. The walls were indeed stained with dark, ominous marks, and Eleanor saw more of the crude drawings, each one depicting scenes of terror and despair. The other children remained silent, their gazes fixed on her, their grins widening as she was brought into their midst. The child who had dragged her here finally released its grip and pointed a pale finger towards Eleanor. Then it turned to the other children, and in unison, they all began to giggle, a chorus of innocent laughter that was now the most terrifying sound Eleanor had ever heard. She was trapped, surrounded by the lost souls of children, in a hidden room stained with the house's dark history. With no hope of escape, the nightmares of her childhood had become her horrifying reality.